Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast, the ultimate blueprint to self-love and inner peace. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach to women, meditation teacher, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. Relationships are tricky, but with the right tools, any couple can thrive. And that's what we're talking about today. It's likely you've heard of the Gottman Institute and the pioneering work of therapist John Gottman, who has created formulas to help relationships thrive. And because relationships either add or distract from our own self-love and inner peace, I sat down with Gottman-trained couples therapist, author, and expert on love advice, Laura Silverstein. Today, we're talking about vulnerability, communication, the rules of engagement that every couple should know, how to fight fair, and what to do if you find yourself parenting your partner. Our conversation is full of small shifts that you can put into practice right now, today, to help your relationship grow and be as healthy as possible. So let's not waste another minute. Let's dive right in. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. I am excited to talk about relationships today. It's something that we all either struggle with or thrive in, and it is an ebb and flow, always. And I am excited to have an expert in couples therapy, in relationships, and I would love for you to introduce yourself and really talk about how you got into this work.
Great. Yeah. So first off, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me on here. I love talking about love. And I just think that it is something that everybody, recognizes that it does take work, and it's good to just keep dialogues up about, how we can take care of ourselves and our relationships and just keep those conversations going. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And Laura, you are a couples therapist that's trained in the Gottman Institute methods. And that's something that's very popularized right now. But for some people, they don't understand what that is. Could you explain a little bit more?
Sure. So the Gottman method is an evidence-based approach. And so it started with John Gottman and Bob Levinson, and they did a lot of research and have been continuing to replicate the research. And they were really interested in looking at couples who were already in relationships that they expected to stay together. So it was called the Newlywed Study. They came back from their honeymoons, and basically we wanted to look to see what were the similarities of the relationships that stayed together and what were the similarities of the relationships that did not work out, so that we as therapists can kind of emulate the experts. So what I love about the model is that it's not some ivory tower psychologist that's the expert. It's we are learning from the people who, have been together for 30 years, never stepping foot into a couples therapist's office, and what they do that works, so that we can help teach couples how to do that. So it's very much of a model where we are coaching couples and talking to each other, having deep, difficult conversations in a way that's respectful and kind, as opposed to telling them what to do or having them talk to us. So, yep.
So you have my mind going in a million different directions right now. Can you give us a snippet of what it takes for those couples who've stayed together versus those that we do see filing for divorce and separating?
Sure. So one of the big predictors of divorce, there's what John Gottman calls the Four-Horsemen of the apocalypse. And these are sort of the negative behavioral communication patterns that are problematic. And one of them is criticism, one is defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. And those four things are most prevalent in couples that are not communicating well, not showing respect for one another. And so a lot of what we do in my office is help people learn what to do in lieu of those behaviors. And by the way, criticism and defensiveness are very, very common in all relationships, not just
Right.
relationships that are ailing. It's the prevalence of those issues.
Mhm.
However, the couples who know how to repair has a much higher correlation with relationship satisfaction and staying together. So all couples fight, 100% of couples have conflict. It's the couples that come back together and know how to repair and make changes and keep working that have the happiest relationships.
Agreed. It's really interesting. I'm actually on the doorstep of my 20th wedding anniversary.
Oh,
And
happy anniversary.
Thank you. I find myself in that space where, if somebody gets a little tense in the relationship where, okay, I can take a step back and we can repair this. And I do see as women come in and they are talking about their spouses, that is the one piece where they step back and look at it from a different perspective that's missing.
It's hard to do, and it's especially hard to initiate a repair if you feel like last time you tried to do it, it made things worse.
Right.
And then what can happen is couples can stop having those repairs because they feel like it's only going to make things worse. And then that can lead to emotional distance.
Right.
So what's helpful is to be able to, there's two things. So one of the other big predictors of relationship dissatisfaction is high levels of negativity and high levels of physiological arousal. So when couples hearts are beating really fast and they're out of breath and they try to keep talking anyway when they're in a heightened state of fight or flight, then what happens is they make things worse. So a lot of what we do is we encourage couples to take a break.
Right.
And usually one part of the couple is really, really wanting a break, and the other member of the couple usually wants to keep talking.
Right.
So then
the chase.
Yeah, exactly. Like one person's knocking on the door and the other person is like, give me a minute. But then when they come back, it's like, okay, that's when you can have a productive conversation and a repair. So a lot of times people are trying to have those conversations at a time where they really don't have access to the frontal cortex. So it's not a productive conversation. So that break helps them to be able to come back and have an effective repair.
You said something that was so important, talking about trying to repair something when you're in the middle of it. And you can't do it. Not only is the other party generally not willing, but your brain is not going to allow you to do so.
Right. Yep. If you're in fight or flight, your body is basically thinking, even if you're not in actual danger, but you're in perceived danger. So your body's ready to fight or play dead. And so that's where the shutdown comes in, is like one partner's playing dead. The other person is, trying to wake the other person up. And this is all normal. It's not evidence there's some huge problem in your relationship. It's just what happens when you try to keep talking, when you should be focusing on having some self-soothing time, taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your partner as well.
Beautifully said. Can we talk about how we can build fundamentally sound relationships? I know I hear that so often, and a lot of women will come in and say, I have all this trauma, I have all this work to do, and I've really stepped away from my relationship in order to try to feed myself. And one of the very first questions I ask is, are we growing together? Are you stepping back to grow?
I love that. What a beautiful question. And I imagine that that's really helpful for people because they're maybe stepping away, believing, oh, I need to kind of take care of my trauma so that then I can return to my partner when I'm kind of cured and ready.
Right.
But another way to look at that is if you're blessed with a relationship with somebody who respects you, loves you, and wants to be a part of your healing, there's a lot of gratitude that you have someone in your life who can be there for you. But that's hard because it requires being vulnerable, and it requires being able to ask for help and support when you're having a hard time, instead of feeling like you have to kind of go do it on your own.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so that becomes the question of, what are the fundamentals? What should I be looking for to craft a relationship? And I want to say that I believe we're both on the same page, that it doesn't matter how long you've been together. If these pieces are not in place, there's still time and the ability to build these fundamental pieces.
100%. Yeah, I'm glad that you said that. People get very freaked out when they find out, oh no, you're a certified Gottman therapist. You can predict divorce with 90% accuracy. Are you going to tell me my relationship is doomed? And I say, no, like that is only if you don't make a change, right? So you're here asking for help and you can turn things around. And so rebuilding a relationship requires two basic fundamental things. It requires increasing positivity, increasing connection, and of course, decreasing negativity and working through conflict management. A lot of people forget the first part, right? So it's like we as human beings, I think, are wired to focus on fixing problems and noticing what's wrong and articulating our wants and our needs and trying to get our needs met. But which is very important. And that's 50% of working on a relationship. But the other part is, what are you building in terms of letting your partner know that they're loved and creating a culture so that you are feeling loved and being loving, so that you can ask for your needs and get those met, but it's happening where there's already a foundation in place of like, these are two people who like and love each other, who want to try to make changes and continue to grow. So in terms of, and the fundamental things are not hard, like they're fun and easy to do. And people think working on a relationship, is hard work. And part of it is, but part of it is just really like having fun together, reaching out. I talk a lot about, what are your daily routines? Are you taking the time to say goodbye to each other? Is that a hug? Is it a kiss? Is it the kind of kiss you give your Aunt Bess? Or is it like, yes, we're like, we are a romantic couple kind of kiss? And that if you have those kinds of connections, then you go off and have your day, but you've got somebody in your corner who is thinking about you. And so it's little things, small things often is what John Gottman calls it, like small things often. So text saying, hey, how'd that conversation with your sister go? Love, you looked cute today. Can't wait to see you tonight. And what happens is usually people are able to do that when things are going really well. You had a great vacation, everything was awesome, and you're like, oh, I miss you. The hard thing is to do that even when you're a little bit annoyed about something that your partner did last night. They still do look cute, even though they didn't empty the dishwasher. Both of those things can coexist. And if you stop saying the positive stuff, then both people will get in the habit of only focusing on the negative, and then you don't feel loved. And then it's really hard to feel like you want to work to try to meet somebody's needs when you don't feel like you're fundamentally loved and respected.
You said something that's really important to point out, is the fact that you said, when we aren't showing up in the good times and the hard times, we do have that break. And that's true if we're just talking about our individual selves, right? If we're only focused on the negative, that's what we're going to continue to create. And we have to really shift back into positive praise of the other human that we're sharing our space with, and get it in reciprocal as well. Very important. Something else that you mentioned, kind of a byproduct, is that we need to feel safe. Safety is huge in a relationship.
Safety is huge in a relationship. And there's a couple ways to do that. So when we're thinking about, okay, how do we build a good relationship? I love that. Just how do we even do that? Everybody wants to have a good relationship. So, so the first thing we started talking about is like building positivity, but the safety doesn't come from telling somebody they look cute. The safety comes from vulnerability. And when you think about, I guess there's a term out there like trauma dump. Trauma bonding, So sometimes people try to be vulnerable, but they might do it a little too quick and a little too deep, and then they get hurt. So the work with vulnerability is to very slowly and gently start to let your partner see some of the things that you usually hide from people, the things that are maybe you're not so proud of, and vulnerability includes positive stuff too, right? It's hard to tell somebody, hey, I want to have a second date with you, right? Like that's that's emotional vulnerability, or
Right.
something sad that happened in your life. If there is trauma, you don't want to share it too quickly. You want to find out, how does this person that I'm talking to, whether it's a partner of 20 years or if it's a second date, right? Like you test the waters in terms of, is it safe to share this with you? Are you going to hold me? Are you going to listen to what I say and, ask me questions and show me that you care? And if that happens and it goes well, then you share a little bit more. And what you'll notice is that your partner will start to do that naturally as well. So you can work on a relationship even if your partner isn't necessarily actively working on it, because it reinforces itself, right?
Right.
If I say good morning, somebody's probably going to say good morning back. Like there's a certain behavioral element to reciprocity. And so to start to be a little bit vulnerable with your partner and let them know that this is okay in a relationship, and the closeness that comes from vulnerability is intimacy, right? So vulnerability leads to intimacy, and none of that can happen without safety. So the safety comes from what happens when I am vulnerable. How do you respond to me? And when you're assessing a relationship, I think that's the main thing I counsel people when they're asking for like dating advice, is like, how do they respond to you when you're talking about yourself? Are they curious? Are they expressing emotion about, like, joining around emotion, that when you're sharing something, when you're sharing an emotion, do they meet you where you're at with that?
Meeting someone where they're at is so important, not where we are, but where they are, so they can meet us in return. Such a huge thing. You mentioned something that made me think of a personal rule in my relationship, and I want to hand it over to the ladies that listen, because it's something that's worked really, really well. When my husband and I were first dating, not even engaged, we had sort of these rules of engagement.
Yeah.
Where we would text, or actually it was call back then, we really weren't texting, call each other and let each other know that we were either on the way or had gotten home, as a form of respect.
Yes.
We would say please and thank you all the time. We would meet the other person and ask, is this a good time?
Yep.
Do you have space for me? Are you available to me right now? And those have carried throughout my entire relationship. And it's been something that not only created safety, it allows vulnerability.
Right.
And respect.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love those rules, Danielle, because they're so, like, they're the kind of thing that is so concrete in expressing that respect. Right. It's like, it is a way to show your partner that you're thinking of them, that they matter, that your safety matters, just in terms of driving home. Saying please and thank you is a way of saying, I'm noticing that you're doing this thing for me. So it's so concrete, but so profound to have that reinforced. So that's awesome.
Thank you. And so simple, right? It's also that way of noticing I am being seen. And I see you, which is a massive thing. And we even still to this day, thank you for doing the dishes, and thank you for putting up the laundry, or thank you for, going to the grocery store for me. And it seems very, very simple, but it's something that I want my children to model. And I hope that, as you're listening, ladies, if that's something that's not in place, give it a try. It really does help build all of those beautiful things in your relationship. Is there another piece that we find most missing in relationships that are not sustainable?
I'm going through in my head, right, what we call the sound relationship house, which is all the different aspects that make up a good relationship. And it is very important. The walls that keep every single layer of the sound relationship house together is trust and commitment. So trust and commitment really impact a relationship in a positive way when they're strong, and in a negative way when they're lacking. A lot of other aspects of a relationship, you can just work on that one little piece, right? Like there's community. A lot of what I do obviously is conflict management. How do you talk about things? How do you fight? How do you fight fair? But trust and commitment, right? That is really, those are the things that you can't ignore. And that when you work on those things, it's going to impact everything like a mobile. The whole, everything will shift both in a positive or a negative direction, right?
Right.
When I talk to people about trust, so there's so many different kinds of trust, right? It's like trust, and when we think about trust, and this is sort of coming from Sue Johnson's attachment work, it's like trust that you have my best interest at heart, right? Do you want me to thrive? Do you celebrate my success? Are you with me when I'm down? Right. And so trusting that somebody is there for you. And that's that primary attachment bond. Sometimes there's also trust with kind of a small t, right? Which is like, do I trust that you're going to be there at 5 o'clock when you said that you were going to be there at 5 o'clock? And we build trust by fulfilled expectations over time. So if somebody says they're going to do something and they don't do something, then that's going to degrade trust. However, it's really important, I think, when we're assessing our relationships to remember that human beings are going to let you down and they're going to forget to do things that they say they're going to do. So it's important to keep working to try to meet each other's needs and reach those expectations. But it's also important to realize that there's a difference between somebody betraying your monogamy agreement, like that kind of trust, versus, this is really hard for me. Like maybe for somebody, time management is really, really hard. And understanding that when we can be realistic about how we understand those expectations, that will also impact trust as well, because we're able to see that we trust them for the big things, the primary things. That do they love us? Do they want us to thrive? And then commitment goes hand in hand with trust, of course, because that kind of connection, and you're able to make a commitment to somebody. I'm going to keep being there for you. And a commitment doesn't have to be lifelong marriage. A commitment just could be, we're here together in this moment and you've got my full attention, in this moment so that I can count on you.
Can I trust that you're here for me in this moment? It is one of the biggest complaints that I hear from women that come sit in my office.
Yes. Tell me what they say.
I get into bed and he's on his phone.
Yeah.
I walk in the door. He doesn't even look up from the television. I try to engage. He's too tired. I hear this all the time. And then I turn it around. Well, tell me about your engagement. Are you fully aware? Well, no, when he's talking about work, I don't care. Well, you're not building that trust, safety, and respect. That what's important to him is important to you.
Yep.
Do you see the phones and the outside distractions being one of the number one things that cause some of the, trust to get shaken?
And if you are really kind of annoyed at your partner for being on their phone, and then the way that you bring it up shows that annoyance and irritation, also makes a difference, right? So there's sort of the kind of, how do we communicate when we feel like we don't have somebody's undivided attention? And if we give them the benefit of the doubt and speak, I like to talk about, in my book, I always talk about speak your truth with kindness, right? And I think especially, so I love that your audience is women. And as women, right, we need to speak up for ourselves. We could go down, we could have an awesome conversation about all the reasons that make it difficult for women to speak up, and the ways that we've been silenced, and the ways that we have been, kind of told to let other people, namely men, right? Like they're the ones that are doing the speaking, and we have this patriarchy. So it's like, sometimes for women to get the courage to speak up, sometimes that momentum is just a little too hard and fast, and it comes out sharp instead of in a way that your partner is much more likely to be able to hear you and want to try to. I talk about it, communication is kind of like the way that you deliver is like giving a gift, right? So if I'm telling you something important about myself, I can whip it at you, or I can wrap it in a present, like with a bow, and you're more likely to open it up and really look, oh, what's inside this gift, if it's presented in a way that makes the person want to open it up and look at it. Now, I'm not saying that your partner still shouldn't listen to what you say. Like, obviously what you say is important, but it's just like statistically more likely that they'll want to listen to what you say if you slow down, wait till you're calm, so you can talk about it in a way that it's a kind message with an assumption, and this is important, an assumption that your partner wants to try to meet your needs. Because if you assume they don't, or you assume that it was malicious intent, then that's going to much more likely put them on the defensive.
Yeah. And again, going back to if you are triggered by the, inability to have your needs met in the moment, then you are going to have that lash out. And again, we're going to create conflict, and we're going to create the rise. And like you said, the gift is a beautiful thing. You also have to know when we have two parties that are coming together and we have some kind of trauma, right? And we have not resolved all of that. And maybe somebody has an aversion to loud noises, and one person communicates in a loud voice when they get upset.
Right.
A lot of times we have that conflict just of the environment.
Sure.
And that causes a problem too.
Sure.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into communication. I think that's so important, because we're not really taught how to communicate. We're not taught how to, one, express our feelings in a way to be heard and seen and to be witnessed. And we aren't taught that it's okay to do so most of the time.
Yeah, it's so true. And I actually think it's good that you're bringing up the word triggers, because they're very, very real.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that is, couples can work on this and make progress, because when you understand somebody's trigger, then you're much more likely to want to try to help them. Right. Whereas if you're responding to the defense against the trigger, then you're much more likely to get defensive.
True.
Right. So if I'm like, you're just yelling at me, your voice is so loud, you're like, I'm trying to be heard, that's going to be very different than, wow, that loud voice brings me back to my dad, who used to scream before he hit my mom.
Right.
Like, you hear that, and you have the compassion is going to come. And then all of a sudden, you're looking at this person who's a vulnerable, you see the little child in them instead of the person that you just were having a fight with.
Right.
And that tends to soften you up. But again, the timing has to be right, because if you're in the middle of the fight, that could backfire. Then you're making yourself too vulnerable, like we talked about. And that, especially if you're triggered. So when you're triggered, I recommend, hey, I'm just feeling triggered right now. I need to take a couple deep breaths. I think it's good that you talked about triggers, because I think it's crucial for all couples to have that in their tool chest.
I'm notorious for saying, if any conversation that's worth having is worth having when you're both okay. Yeah. And if that means that you need to leave, then you need to leave with the understanding, I'm not leaving you, I'm leaving the moment.
Well said. I'm not leaving you, I'm leaving this moment. I love that. And when you take your moment, how are you using that time? Are you using it to soothe yourself and be kind to yourself? Or are you planning what you're going to say, like kind of an attorney, coming up with word for word what your partner said was wrong and how you're going to set them straight? So the research shows that what you think about during your timeout has a direct correlation with how the conversation goes when you return. So if you're able to focus on your body instead of your fight that you just had, that's what's going to be effective.
Yeah. How do we do that? I know that we don't want to state our case, right? We don't want to go through and have all of those pinpoints, like you said. I actually had a beautiful woman that I worked with several years ago that she would open the notes of her phone and write down all of the reasons why she was pissed. Yeah. And so that she could read it when she went back. And I was like, no, stop doing that. You've got to stop doing that. Like, one, how are you even aware of that's how the conversation is going to go anyway? Right. And if you are so focused on what is on your list, You're not hearing. There's no active listening.
Right.
And that person doesn't feel safe or seen either. You're just stating your case, like you said, like an attorney.
I agree with you. So in terms of, those communication skills that you were talking about, when you do return, I think you were saying before that we don't get much education in how to communicate. And one of the things that's problematic is people often talk about I statements, but we're not really educated what an I statement is. So,
agreed.
Right. So it's like, I feel blank. Now, most people, and all you listeners out there, I encourage you to start listening to TV shows, movies. When you hear somebody say, I feel, very rarely is the next word that comes out of their mouth an emotion. It's usually the word like or that, or sometimes even you. I feel you.
Yeah, very true.
You're not listening to me. That's not talking about your emotions, right? Or I feel that we are going in circles, or I feel like, and then what you're doing is you're not talking about your emotion. You're talking about an opinion. So I'm a big stickler. I think of it like grammar. Like when I was a kid, we had to diagram sentences, and it was like the part of speech was a verb. What was a verb? What was it? An adjective.
Right.
And so if you think about language in that way, when you're talking to your partner about something that you need or something really, really important, it behooves you to like take a minute to think about how you're going to do that so that your message, really important message, gets heard.
Right.
So we have this little formula. It's called the gentle startup, and it starts, I feel. And then the next word is an emotion, not like that or as if, not you.
Right. Never you.
I feel emotion about, and then you express whatever you're upset about in a way that is not blaming, but is neutral in your, your language. So you're not saying, I feel upset that you were really mad at me because I didn't take the dog out and it pooped on the floor or whatever. Instead of saying that, you would say, I feel confused about why you're upset, or I'm wondering if you might be upset, not assuming that you're correct about the other person's experience, but using language that you're talking about it in terms of what you saw, heard, or interpreted instead of what they did or how they felt. But then this is key for a constructive conversation. You can't just talk about your feelings, because then your partner's probably going to talk about their feelings, and then you're playing ping pong. So instead, it's like, this is, and my request is this. This is what I'm going to ask for. And a lot of times people forget it. Even though I do this in my session, I do it with my 9 o'clock, my 10 o'clock, my 11 o'clock. Everyone still forgets to put the request at the end of the soft startup, because we're just not conditioned to do that.
Right.
And when we ask for what we need, we're more likely to get it. Right. So I really want to talk to you about how we're going to divide labor around, all the household tasks. I really want you to just lower your voice when you're talking to me. It would really help me hear you. So when you ask for what you need after talking about your feelings, then your partner is motivated to hear what you're saying and hopefully try to, if all is going well, try to say, okay, you're asking for this and let me try to give it to you. And if not, like, maybe I can't give you exactly what you need, but let me think about what you need. And then you take turns, and then the other person has the opportunity to do the same thing, instead of going back and forth where both people are kind of persuading each other or trying to make a case for their perspective.
I think there's another point that I want to add to this, because I hear it all the time where women will come in and say, well, we've been married for so long. They should know, what I need and want.
I know.
And I always say, okay, but when did they go to psychic school?
I know.
Like,
I know.
You're asking them to know exactly what you need and want at all times. And just because you've been with them so long doesn't mean that is a need that has come up before.
Right. Doesn't mean that you don't have to repeat it, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
Even if you have said it before. Yeah. I get it, right? I mean, I think the blessing and the curse is how well we know our partners. So if somebody's been married for 20 years, you know each other really well. And you might be right about a lot of your mind reads of what you think your partner thinks, feels, and believes.
Right.
But the problem is that that goes back to what you were saying before about being in the moment with that person and committed to being sort of that curious student of like, tell me who you are and what your experience is.
Right.
So if we take that and apply it to this perspective, is like, if you don't know, if I'm expecting you to be able to read my mind, it's in some ways taking your truth, like not giving you the opportunity to talk about your truth either.
Right.
So both people have their experiences.
I think it also removes the fact that when we don't do that, when we're in that mind reading kind of thought process, is that, are you looking at your partner from 20 years ago? Or are you looking at the partner right now, the expectations, needs, and wants and desires of that person right now, who they are today, not yesterday, not 5 years ago. We change and evolve.
Yeah. And it's wonderful to have somebody say, what do you think?
Yes.
Right. And not assume that they know what you think. It feels good to have somebody be curious about what's on our mind. And if you have to repeat something, it's still going to be way more efficient. Like, it's not like you're giving them it's not like you're doing them a favor. You're also doing yourself a favor, because if you remind them of what you want, then they're more likely to remember and everybody's happier.
And I would say that it would build the intimacy. And we're not talking about sexual intimacy, but just actual intimacy within the relationship.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. We feel connected to somebody when they want to know us. Like you were saying, see and be seen. That's that's what we want as human beings.
Yeah. It's what we're wired for. That's what our brains are wired for. That's why we, move in packs and families. I mean, we are that connective being. And if we don't have it, then we feel lonely, sad, depressed, all of those things.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem within relationships, no matter how long they've been, when we don't feel seen and heard.
Right.
But still feel lonely. It's devastating.
Right. And to wish that our partner would sort of know what we need, then also leaves us lonelier.
Right.
Because we're waiting for them to do something.
The other part of this, and we talked a little bit about it before we started, there's two pieces. One, many people feel that they have to be their complete best self. This is the best version of me that anybody's going to get before they engage in a relationship. And then the second part is when a relationship turns into a parenting situation. Can we talk about, I see both all the time. Can we talk about having, I know you do, about, do we have to be our best selves to engage in a relationship?
Right. So that's kind of a double answer, I think, because we are at our best when we're focused on ourselves.
Right.
When we're focused on self-care, taking care of ourselves, focusing on what we can control, not what we can't control. Right. If we look to our partner to be the person to meet all our needs, then we're just giving them an impossible job, assuming everybody, all your listeners are married or in a relationship with a human being and not some like ethereal being. Right? When we're in a relationship with a knucklehead who's going to mess up and forget to do things all the time. And guess what? Like, we're knuckleheads and we're going to forget to do things and let our partner down all the time. Right. So I think that what you're saying about kind of like being whole or being our best self, I think we owe that to ourselves to both challenge ourselves to be the best person and be the best version of ourselves on the one side of the coin. And on the other side of the coin, give ourselves permission to just like, give yourself a break. You're human. You're who you are. You're good enough just for sitting there. Like, you are good enough as you are today. And how do we like, all of us, and I'm sure the people, all your listeners, I'm sure are like so focused on self-growth.
Right.
because here they are, they're listening to this podcast, or you guys, sorry, we should talk directly to you. So here you are, you're listening to this podcast, you're focused, you believe in self-growth, but also then you've got all of us telling you like you're good enough as you are. And I think that both of those are true. Like you deserve to be better and to be happier. And so you might need to make some changes to be happier. But if you don't, like that's okay too. Right. And ultimately, if we add to that, like, does your partner have the same? Like, are they good enough just for sitting there? Are they good enough as they are? And do you accept them as they are, as well as them trying to make changes to be a better partner for you?
That was what my ad was going to be. Do you believe that? Do you believe that about yourself and your partner? Because if you don't believe about both, then you can't be your best self regardless. And I'm of the philosophy that your best self is who you are right now. Like you said, you're good enough. And if you grow, then that's, 2.0 of your best self.
I love that. Yeah.
Right. There's 50 points or whatever, however many times you change and grow and shed what's not working and you bring something else in, then we're just in the next level of best self. We don't have to burn it down, right? Like we don't have to burn everything down to start over.
I love that. And I honestly, I think it might be a little harder to apply that to your partner. Yeah. To say, is it okay if your partner doesn't keep changing and growing? Right. Right. It's like kind of, they might be able to make the changes that you want them to make. And they might work hard and be able to make some of them, but not all of them. And what a gift you can give your partner, and you can give yourself to say, we're both human, we're both imperfect, and we are okay. Like we are good enough. And how to be a feminist and know what you deserve and still be okay with your partner letting you down sometimes.
Amen. That's a message we all need, right? We all need that message to say it's okay to be what you want and how you want to be and how you want to show up, and still have a partner that may not be the exact version that you hope. Because if you throw somebody under the bus and say, change right now, and this is what I'm requiring of you, they're going to say, great, I'll try, maybe, but it's probably not going to stick. They're doing it for you, not them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to add to that is if they want to make the same change that you want them to make, then it's, I don't want to say smooth sailing because it's not easy, but at least you're working toward the same goal.
Right. So whenever we do hand over our expectations to someone and they can't meet them, there's this, I don't want to say natural progression because I don't think that's fair, but I think there's this sometimes an element of parenting your spouse or your partner comes in hardcore. And we begin to kind of feel like they're not responsible for themselves. They're not responsible for their lives. They can't make good decisions. And you begin to do all of the work. And then we get really upset.
Right. Part of the challenge, and this might be hard for some listeners to hear, right? So part of the challenge is to try to understand what the other person's perspective is. Yeah. We don't want to all be feeling like we're doing everything and it's and all of everything that's on our plate, tends to be a lot of decision fatigue, right? Like statistically, women are much more likely to be the ones who are holding all the information and having to keep track of the fact that there's a vet appointment and, the ear infection medicine is at CVS and, and all of those things, in addition to everything else, there's this fatigue that comes in our brain and then there can be a resentment that can happen if we feel like we're doing so much more than our partner's doing. And then that creates a competition, right? So when you're in individual therapy, you probably hear a lot more about like the frustration of parenting. Like I'm parenting my my partner and like
Mm-hmm.
they're not being responsible. I'm doing everything. And then when I've got two people in the room, I've got one person saying, I don't want to be your parent. And I have the other person saying, like, you're not giving me credit. You're not seeing how much I do. Like, I'm working
Mm-hmm.
hard as well. And then there can be this competition of which work is harder, who's working harder, stronger. Every now and then, one partner will say, you're absolutely right. You work, I'm not pulling my weight and let me up the ante. That's
Mm-hmm.
rare.
I can imagine.
Right. Most of the time people are like, how do you compare which work is harder? And most people statistically, they've done research on everything, right?
Everything.
And one of the studies shows like most people feel like they're doing more of the work. And then when you sit
Mm-hmm.
down and analyze it, they're not doing as much more as they think they're doing. Like, so people tend to over exaggerate how much more they're doing. It's helpful to remember that, but
Right.
it's also, but I also don't want to, paint that with a broad brush and say it's, like there are many, many relationships that are in balance, and that's not okay. And it's important to speak up
Right.
and advocate for yourself and ask for what you need in that situation. So I don't want to say everything is always 50-50, but I do think that in all situations, there are two perspectives. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm feeling like I'm parenting my partner, I think it's important to have that conversation in a way that is, we have to be careful with our language, because that's going to be offensive and condescending if I say, I feel like you're a child and I'm your mom. And
Right.
that's probably not going to turn into a very productive conversation, because my partner is going to be like, I'm an adult and you're not my
Right.
mom. And that's gross because we have sex.
Please don't put that image in my mind.
Like, it's really, really offensive to people, right? Like when people say that, it's really offensive. So I help to navigate that conversation of what are you actually saying? So you're not actual parent, but it sounds like what you're saying is you feel like you're holding too much of the burden.
Mm-hmm.
Are there things that your partner can give you that are going to help lighten your load? And you, partner, are you willing to do that to help, lighten that load so that your partner doesn't feel like they're taking care of you, but that you're two equal partners.
Yeah.
So I like to kind of shift the language and say, like, so what's the goal? What is it that you do want instead of what you don't want?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, you don't want to be somebody's mom, but what's the opposite of that? And I would say, I'm sure you have this in your work, Danielle, that a lot of times, like, you have just sort of go-to phrases.
Yes, all the time. That's mine. I always say that. What's the opposite of it? Like,
you
what?
Too.
What? Yes, absolutely.
We have the same catchphrase. I love it.
We
were destined to be having this conversation today.
Absolutely.
Right. So what's the opposite of being a mom? Like, what is it that you want? You want teamwork, you want partnership, you want to feel respected and admired. And what behaviorally can your partner do to help you feel those things that you want to feel? And if you can articulate that, then your partner is much more likely to feel motivated to help lighten your load than if you use the word child.
Yeah.
That's my prediction. I mean, we could do a study. You could try both ways and see which one works, and then like report back.
We'll formulate it and get back to you. Find people.
Yeah. We need a sample size.
Yes. I always say that love is actually, while it is an emotion, it's 100% an experience. And if we can get into the experience of loving one another, everything changes.
Yes.
So could you give us a bit of a off the top of your mind, what we can do to have the best experience?
Yes. I love that question. And I obviously share your sentiment about, we talk about love. If love is a noun, then you're finding love and kind of keeping it. And, like all these reality shows talk about finding love and keeping love, right? That's when you look at love as a noun. And so love as an action verb means doing things. So that's the name of my book. Love is an action verb. Yes. So it's what are you actually doing to show up for your partner and remind them that you see them, that you value them, and that means telling them verbally, non-verbally, emotionally. It means being vulnerable and being supportive and asking for what you need, dealing with your conflicts, not putting them under the rug, so that it's authentic. If you don't deal with those things, then you're not in an authentic relationship. So those are actions, right? So it would be nice if, love was just something that you had to look for and then you found it. And it's kind of like, oh, look, I found a shell on a beach and now I just have this shell and it's going to continue to be beautiful. No, it's like you have to water the tree. And what's that expression? The grass is always greener where you water it.
Right.
And so watering it usually looks like giving your partner what you wish they were giving you more of.
We can get into a whole conversation about love language and the way we're showing up and all of those things. I feel like we're just getting started and yet we've run out of time. I think we have to come back for another conversation
I would love that. This is my favorite topic. And I love you because your questions are so fantastic.
Oh, thank you. How can we find your fantastic book and support ourselves in a way that is grounded and building a solid relationship?
So I have a workbook coming out. Ooh. So that's basically going to be something that you can do with your partner together. It's got a lot of exercises, like over 70 exercises, everything from how well do you know each other, and focusing more on positivity, and a lot of conflict management, like how do you build intimacy, how do you build trust, and how do you talk about things when you're upset. So that's coming out, and my website is laurasilverstein.co. It's not com, laurasilverstein.co, and that'll have all the information on there, and you can get on my mailing list, and then I'll tell you about anything else that I have. I'm also on TikTok, Laura's Love Advice.
On TikTok, you guys, you have to go and follow her on TikTok. I always end our conversations the same way, and that is to ask you, what are your 3 gratitudes? Things that you are most grateful for. It could be anything personally, it could be what you've learned and shared today, or even 3 things that you wish that people knew and engaged with. I'll leave it to you. What are your 3 things?
Oh my gosh. I feel so blessed, right? Like, I just know that I'm one of those people in the world that just had a lot of things that came to me, that were given to me, and I'm incredibly grateful. My family, so my husband and 2 kids, they're just my whole life. And my husband teaches me what love is every single day, so I don't get too high on my horse. He's a couples therapist as well. And my kids, they're 15 and 18, and just being their mom has helped me realize, what's important. So I feel like gratitude for my family, gratitude for my mentors that I've had the extraordinary opportunity to train with some of the most brilliant minds in the field, and has helped me be able to teach other people how to have healthy relationships. And then lastly, but not least, I should have started, is my clients, right? Yeah. I learn from them every single day how to be a better therapist, how to be a better human. I just love my clients deeply.
Such a beautiful space to be in, to know that you are witnessing someone in their growth and creating change together while you hold their hand. It's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'm also going to just say for a moment, 2 couples therapists together, I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
It's so funny how many people say that. And my poor kids, right? Like,
right. I love it.
Yeah, we use all the tools in an annoying way.
I'm sure.
But I also tell my clients all the time, like, look, I'm a couples therapist. I've been doing this for 30 years. I am married to a couples therapist. We still are critical and defensive, and we still, have fights, and we have our little booklets, and we literally have the same tools that we teach our clients, because it works. It works. And you need booklets sometimes to keep you on track.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today, for your wisdom, and for allowing us to have a little bit more knowledge than when we started today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on and for the incredible work you're doing for everybody out there, all these women who are wanting to learn and grow. It's a wonderful thing.
Thank you. There are so many takeaways from this conversation, from properly learning how to use I language, how to step away when there's a heated disagreement, to meeting your partner's needs, to learning how to ask for what you want and need. Oh man, Laura really brought each of us a gift with her knowledge, and I cannot thank her enough. If you'd like to follow her on TikTok, she is one of the leading experts on love there, and you can find her at Laura's Love Advice, or you can visit her website at laurasilverstein.co. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips to bettering your life and your relationship, and you are seeking daily inspiration and additional tools and tips, you can follow me on social media at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. And you can visit the show notes, the blog, and my website at getyourlifetogethergirl.com. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.